There is a reason the pressure inside you has started to feel unbearable lately, and it is not because you are weak, failing, or falling behind. Something enormous is changing above you right now. But most people will move through this day completely unconscious to it. They will continue rushing through routines, reacting to stress, forcing conversations, chasing validation, never realizing the energetic atmosphere surrounding them has already transformed. But you are not going to experience this shift the way they do, because part of you has already begun sensing it before your mind could explain why. You may have noticed your body asking for more rest lately, your emotions becoming heavier, your patience thinner, your spirit exhausted from constantly carrying tension that never seemed to end. It has felt like you were trapped inside an invisible race that nobody allowed you to stop running. Every day demanded more from you. More energy, more effort, more emotional labor, more resilience. And even when you tried to pause, something inside you remained braced for impact, as if life could collapse the moment you let your guard down. That feeling was not random. It was the result of an astrological atmosphere that has been pushing humanity into survival mode for weeks. Mars has been moving through Aries, the sign where its energy becomes sharp, impulsive, aggressive, and relentlessly active. This combination creates an emotional climate where everything feels urgent. Conversations become battles. Attraction becomes competition. Desire becomes pursuit. Even love starts feeling like something you have to earn through struggle. And whether you realized it consciously or not, this energy has been affecting you deeply. It has kept your nervous system overstimulated. It has made genuine softness feel unsafe. It has convinced you that slowing down equals losing control. That is why so many people recently have felt emotionally reactive, impatient, defensive, and strangely disconnected, even while craving intimacy more than ever. The pressure has been building for so long that many people forgot what emotional peace even feels like. But today marks the moment that cycle begins to dissolve. Something extraordinary is unfolding across the sky, and its timing could not be more significant. On May 18th, within only hours of one another, Mars exits the consuming fire of Aries and enters Taurus, while Venus leaves the restless mental energy of Gemini and enters the deeply emotional waters of Cancer. This alone would already be powerful, but what happens next is what changes everything. During the early hours of May 19th at 1:30 in the morning, Venus and Mars form an exact sextile, a harmonious 60-degree connection that astrologers recognize as one of the most cooperative and emotionally supportive alignments possible between these two planets. But the detail that makes this moment truly rare is that both planets form this aspect at 0 degrees. 0 degrees represents pure initiation, untouched energy, an opening before patterns solidify. It is not about repairing the past. It is not about dragging old emotional baggage into a slightly improved future. This is energetic rebirth, a complete clearing of relational momentum that has exhausted you for far too long. And whether you fully understand it yet or not, your soul has been waiting for this permission to finally arrive. Because underneath all the stress, all the emotional fatigue, all the tension you have been carrying, there has been another truth quietly growing inside you. You no longer want relationships built on instability. You no longer want chemistry that only survives through confusion, anxiety, inconsistency, or emotional games. Somewhere deep inside yourself, you became tired of mistaking chaos for passion, tired of interpreting emotional unpredictability as depth, tired of connections that demanded hypervigilance instead of peace. And this new Venus-Mars alignment begins revealing a completely different experience of attraction, one that many people are not emotionally prepared for because they have spent so long associating intensity with suffering. What arrives now is not weak, passive, or boring. It is powerful in a way that feels unfamiliar because it does not activate your survival instincts, Mars in Taurus no longer rushes. It does not attack love like a battlefield. It builds slowly, intentionally, steadily. Venus in Cancer no longer scatters attention across endless distractions or intellectual uncertainty. It craves emotional sincerity, safety, nurturing, and genuine closeness. Together, these energies create something profoundly healing, a form of chemistry where actions and emotions finally begin moving in the same direction. A connection where you no longer have to decode mixed signals or constantly question where you stand. And this is why this transit may feel strangely emotional for you at first. Because when your nervous system has adapted to chaos for too long, peace can initially feel unfamiliar, safety can feel suspicious, consistency can feel almost unreal. But this alignment is teaching you that real intimacy was never supposed to exhaust you. True passion was never meant to leave you emotionally starving while begging for reassurance. The Venus-Mars sextile operates differently from explosive aspects that create temporary highs followed by inevitable crashes. This energy develops slowly, consciously, intentionally. It asks you to participate instead of simply reacting impulsively. And that is why this moment matters so much. Because the relationships, conversations, attractions, and emotional realizations emerging now have the potential to grow into something sustainable instead of self-destructive. This is the beginning of a different emotional era, one where connection is no longer measured by how intensely someone destabilizes you, but by how deeply they allow you to finally exhale. And if you have been wondering why your soul suddenly feels desperate for softness, rest, reassurance, and emotional honesty, now you understand. The universe is not weakening you. It is pulling you out of survival mode so you can finally experience the kind of chemistry that does not demand pain in exchange for love. What makes this alignment so rare is not simply the fact that Venus and Mars are cooperating. It is the way they are finally dissolving the internal war that so many people have been carrying between desire and behavior, between emotional longing and the fear of reaching for it. Most of the time, these energies clash inside people without them even realizing it. One part of you craves closeness, while another part pushes it away the moment it arrives. You want intimacy, yet your defenses activate before anyone can truly touch your heart. You hunger for affection, but exhaustion, fear, pride, or emotional confusion keep sabotaging the very connection you claim to want. For many people, attraction has become tangled with anxiety. Love has become mixed with performance. Vulnerability has felt dangerous. But something shifts now, and the shift is deeper than people understand. The atmosphere changing around you today is not merely romantic, it is psychological, emotional, energetic. It is creating a temporary opening where the gap between what your heart desires and the way you pursue it finally begins to close. Suddenly, communication feels softer. Attraction feels less forced. Emotional exchanges stop feeling like strategic games and start feeling genuine. There is a strange ease emerging now, almost as if people who could never emotionally meet each other before are suddenly speaking the same emotional language without effort. And to understand why this feels so different from the exhausting patterns of the recent past, you need to understand the two forces creating it. Venus enters Cancer on May 18th at 9 in the evening, and the emotional atmosphere changes immediately. The previous Venus in Gemini energy kept everything moving quickly, mentally, and lightly. It prioritized stimulation over emotional depth. Conversations became flirtatious, but emotionally detached. Connections formed rapidly, but often lacked grounding. People became addicted to attention, curiosity, and endless possibilities, while secretly avoiding the vulnerability required for true intimacy. It created excitement, but not emotional safety. And eventually, many people started realizing they were surrounded by conversations, yet starving for real emotional nourishment. Venus entering Cancer changes the frequency completely. Cancer is ruled by the moon, the celestial body tied to memory, emotional instinct, comfort, family, and the need to feel protected. When Venus moves into this sign, attraction becomes emotional instead of performative. Suddenly, people stop caring as much about status, charm, appearances, or clever words. What becomes magnetic now is emotional sincerity. The ability to make someone feel emotionally safe. The ability to listen without judgment. The ability to hold another person's softness without weaponizing it later. This energy awakens a longing that runs far deeper than attraction. It awakens the desire to belong somewhere emotionally, to feel understood without constantly explaining yourself, to rest your nervous system in someone's presence instead of remaining emotionally guarded every second. Venus in Cancer craves intimacy that feels private, sacred, nurturing, and real. Shared silence becomes more meaningful than endless conversation. Emotional consistency becomes more attractive than unpredictability. People begin yearning for closeness that feels like home, rather than stimulation that feels temporary. But this energy also carries emotional shadows, and ignoring them would be dangerous. Venus in Cancer can become overly attached. It can mistake emotional dependency for love. It can withdraw into silence at the first sign of rejection, or overextend itself emotionally, while secretly building resentment underneath the surface. This placement teaches the difficult balance between nurturing and smothering, between emotional openness and emotional self-abandonment. The lesson is not to lose yourself inside another person while trying to create safety. The lesson is to create emotional depth without drowning inside it. And this is where Mars entering Taurus changes everything. Mars shifts into Taurus on May 18th at 6:30 in the evening, and this transition may be one of the most emotionally significant, energetic changes of the year. Mars in Aries moved like wildfire. Fast decisions, fast attraction, fast anger, fast reactions. Everything felt immediate and urgent. It created a constant state of internal acceleration that left people emotionally and physically exhausted. But Taurus operates completely differently. Taurus is fixed earth energy ruled by Venus, and when Mars enters this sign, it is forced to slow down, to stop rushing, to stop chasing endlessly, to stop operating purely from adrenaline. This is considered Mars in detriment, astrologically, but that does not make it weak. In many ways, it makes it wiser. Mars in Taurus redirects desire away from impulsive conquest and towards stability, embodiment, and sustainability. It asks you to stop treating your life like an emergency. It reconnects desire back to the physical body, instead of leaving it trapped inside anxious mental loops. This is why so many people may suddenly feel an overwhelming need for rest right now. Your body has been carrying survival tension for too long. Mars in Taurus reminds you that exhaustion is not a badge of honor. It reconnects you with the senses. Touch becomes important again. Food tastes richer. Silence feels healing. Physical affection becomes grounding instead of performative. This energy values consistency over intensity, presence over spectacle. It builds attraction slowly, carefully, deliberately. And because it moves slowly, it creates something the previous energy could not sustain: endurance. Mars in Taurus does not beg for attention or aggressively pursue validation. It understands value through patience. Like the bull, it appears calm on the surface. But once committed, its loyalty and persistence become immovable. And when these two energies begin cooperating through the Venus-Mars sextile, something deeply healing emerges. Venus in Cancer brings emotional tenderness, nurturing, and vulnerability. Mars in Taurus brings steadiness, reliability, and physical grounding. Water and earth naturally support one another. Earth gives water structure, water softens and nourishes earth. The emotional and physical dimensions of connection stop competing and finally begin supporting each other. And because Mars is moving through Taurus, a Venus-ruled sign, Mars becomes subject to Venusian values. Action must support emotional care. Desire must honor emotional sensitivity. Strength must protect softness instead of overpowering it. This creates a kind of chemistry many people have secretly been searching for their entire lives without realizing it. A connection where someone's actions consistently match their emotional words. A connection where vulnerability is not punished. A connection where attraction no longer feels unstable or emotionally dangerous. This is not the adrenaline rush of toxic unpredictability. This is something far more transformative. It is the realization that genuine passion can exist alongside peace. That emotional safety does not kill desire, it deepens it. And for many people watching this unfold, that realization alone may become the emotional turning point that changes the way they experience love forever. Something extraordinary becomes fully activated during the early hours of May 19th. And if you have been waiting for a sign that the emotional atmosphere surrounding love, attraction, and connection is finally beginning to heal, this is it. At 0 degrees and 13 minutes, Venus and Mars perfect their sextile, and the meaning behind this exact alignment reaches far beyond ordinary astrology. This is not just a pleasant transit creating temporary attraction or surface-level romance. This alignment acts like a cosmic confirmation that healthy chemistry is still possible, even after disappointment, emotional exhaustion, heartbreak, and years of relational confusion. It is as though the universe itself pauses for a moment and reveals what connection looks like when emotional needs and physical desire stop fighting each other. For so long, people have accepted emotional instability as normal. They have mistaken inconsistency for excitement, emotional unavailability for mystery, and chaos for passion. But this Venus-Mars activation exposes a completely different emotional reality. It shows what happens when attraction is allowed to feel emotionally safe instead of emotionally dangerous. And while everyone collectively feels this energetic shift to some degree, there are 3 zodiac signs standing directly in the center of this transformation. For these signs, the emotional and romantic effects of this transit may become impossible to ignore. Their entire relational landscape is beginning to change, and what unfolds over the coming weeks could alter the way they experience intimacy forever. Cancer. This moment belongs to you more than anyone else. Venus enters your first house of identity, appearance, and personal magnetism on May 18th. And almost immediately, something about your energy becomes impossible for people to overlook. You may not even realize it at first, but others will begin reacting to you differently. There is a softness, warmth, and emotional glow radiating from you now that naturally draws people closer. But this is not shallow attraction. It is deeper than that. People are responding to your emotional presence, to the authenticity that is finally beginning to emerge from beneath layers of self-protection and emotional caution. And with Jupiter also moving through your sign during this period, the effect becomes amplified in ways that feel almost surreal. For once, you are beginning to feel more emotionally aligned with yourself. The insecurities that usually silence you are losing their grip. The emotional armor you have carried for years is becoming lighter, and that changes the way people experience you. At the same time, Mars shifts into your 11th house of friendships, networks, and social connections, creating a powerful bridge between your personal magnetism and your social environment. This is important because the chemistry entering your life now is not arriving through isolation. It is emerging through community, mutual connections, friendships, conversations, gatherings, and social spaces where emotional familiarity already exists. Someone who once felt ordinary may suddenly become emotionally magnetic. A friendship could quietly evolve into something deeper without warning. A connection inside your extended circle may awaken emotions neither of you expected. The sextile between your first and 11th houses creates opportunities for others to finally see you differently, but that only happens if you allow yourself to be visible. And that may be the real lesson unfolding for you now. Cancer often hides when emotions become overwhelming. You retreat. You protect yourself. You disappear into emotional safety zones whenever vulnerability feels risky. But this transit asks you to do the opposite. It asks you to let yourself be witnessed. Because the version of you emerging now carries a kind of emotional radiance people desperately crave. The universe is placing openings in front of you, but you must participate in them instead of hiding from them. Taurus. This activation moves directly through your body, your confidence, your physical presence, and the effect could feel life-changing. Mars enters your first house and your own sign on May 18th, creating a surge of grounded personal power that you have not felt in a very long time. Yes, astrologically, Mars is considered challenged in Taurus. But for you, this is less about weakness and more about awakening dormant strength. The frantic urgency that dominated recent months begins leaving your nervous system. In its place comes something steadier, heavier, calmer, but also far more magnetic. You are no longer forcing energy outward, desperately seeking validation. You are embodying it naturally. People notice it in the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you occupy space without apology. There is a physical confidence returning to you now, not loud or aggressive, but undeniable. And more importantly, you are finally beginning to notice yourself differently. Mars in your first house awakens life force energy. Motivation returns, desire returns, presence returns. Meanwhile, Venus enters Cancer and activates your third house of communication, local interactions, and everyday exchanges. This is where your chemistry begins unfolding, not through distant fantasies, but through ordinary moments that suddenly become emotionally charged. Conversations begin carrying unexpected emotional tension. Text messages linger in your mind longer than usual. Someone in your daily environment may suddenly become impossible to ignore. The sextile between your first and third houses creates an extraordinary combination between physical magnetism and emotional communication. Your words now carry warmth. Your confidence becomes emotionally inviting instead of intimidating. Attraction develops through familiarity, humor, conversation, shared routines, and intellectual connection woven together with undeniable physical chemistry. This is not rushed passion. It is gradual attraction, building through repeated moments of genuine connection. Pay attention to who consistently appears around you during this period. The chemistry you have been searching for may already exist much closer than you think. And then there is Scorpio. Scorpio, the emotional heaviness you have been carrying recently, was not accidental. The full moon in your sign on May 1st forced emotional truths to rise to the surface, whether you were ready or not. You have been confronting deep internal shadows, painful realizations, emotional fears, and patterns you can no longer avoid. It has been exhausting. There were moments when you probably felt emotionally stripped open, forced to examine wounds and emotional defenses you spent years trying to control. But now the energy begins changing. Mars, your traditional ruling planet, finally leaves your sixth house of obligation, work, stress, and daily survival patterns, and enters your seventh house of committed relationships and partnership. And the shift may feel like finally coming up for air emotionally after holding your breath for far too long. The obsessive focus on managing everything alone begins softening. Your energy turns outward again, toward intimacy, trust, and emotional partnership. But unlike before, this time you are not seeking shallow attachment or emotional distraction. You are seeking something deeper, steadier, and emotionally honest. The work you have done internally is beginning to transform the kinds of connections you attract externally, and that is the reward hidden inside all the emotional intensity you recently survived. Because this transit is not simply bringing chemistry into your life, it is bringing the possibility of connection that no longer requires you to betray yourself in order to keep it. What unfolds after this shift is far bigger than a temporary romantic high or a fleeting emotional spark. For weeks, maybe even months, your energy has been consumed by survival patterns, responsibilities, routines, physical exhaustion, and emotional maintenance. It has felt as though all your life force has been poured into simply keeping everything functioning. Many of you have been carrying stress inside your bodies for so long that tension started feeling normal. The pressure to keep moving, keep producing, keep solving problems never seemed to stop. But now that energetic current begins redirecting itself away from constant survival and toward connection, intimacy, and emotional meaning. This is especially powerful for Scorpio because Mars, your traditional ruling planet, finally leaves your sixth house of work, obligation, and daily strain, and enters your seventh house of committed relationships and partnership. The focus of your life begins shifting away from endless emotional self-preservation and toward genuine relational experience. And at the exact same time, Venus enters Cancer and activates your ninth house, the realm connected to expansion, wisdom, travel, spiritual understanding, philosophy, and the search for something greater than ordinary existence. This changes the entire quality of the chemistry entering your life now. The attraction unfolding under this transit is not shallow. It is not simply physical. It carries a sense of growth attached to it. The person entering your emotional field may challenge your worldview, expand your perspective, or awaken parts of yourself that have been dormant for years. This is the kind of chemistry that changes the way you see life itself. For some, it may emerge through travel, education, spiritual communities, or conversations about purpose and meaning. For others, an existing relationship may suddenly deepen because both people are finally emotionally aligned in ways they were not before. But underneath all of it is one central truth. This energy is asking you to stop expecting betrayal as the inevitable outcome of intimacy. After everything you have emotionally processed recently, the universe is attempting to show you another possibility. That love does not always have to arrive through destruction. That loyalty can exist without emotional imprisonment. That vulnerability can coexist with strength instead of threatening it. And that realization alone may feel overwhelming because part of you has become so accustomed to emotional defense that genuine safety almost feels unfamiliar. But this is the doorway opening now, not just for Scorpio, but for everyone touched by this Venus-Mars sextile. And the effects will not only appear emotionally, they will appear physically. Pay close attention to your body over the next several days. Many people will notice a strange release of nervous tension they did not even realize they were carrying. Breathing becomes deeper. Sleep may feel more restorative. Emotional urgency begins calming. It may feel as though your nervous system is finally stepping out of constant alert mode after months of overstimulation. And once that internal pressure begins softening, something else becomes easier to notice. The people entering your emotional field. But the chemistry activated by this alignment may not arrive the way movies taught you to expect. It is not necessarily dramatic, explosive, or chaotic. In fact, the strongest connections emerging now may initially feel surprisingly calm. A conversation that lingers in your mind longer than expected. A moment of eye contact that feels emotionally disarming. Someone whose presence relaxes you instead of activating anxiety. Someone who makes silence feel comfortable rather than awkward. This is not the adrenaline of unstable attraction. This is the slow emergence of emotional trust. And that is why this chemistry has the potential to last. Because it is not built on fantasy or emotional volatility. It develops through consistency, through repeated moments of emotional safety, through someone proving over time that their actions align with their words. The emotional bond deepens gradually instead of collapsing under unrealistic intensity. And communication becomes especially important now because Mercury is also forming powerful aspects on May 19th. A trine to Pluto strengthens emotional honesty and gives people the courage to speak truths they normally suppress. Earlier in the day, Mercury also forms a sextile to Neptune, softening communication and increasing empathy, intuition, and emotional understanding. Conversations may suddenly become more vulnerable than expected. People may finally say what they truly feel, instead of hiding behind emotional defenses. And this creates a rare opportunity for emotional transparency, but only if you are willing to participate honestly instead of retreating into fear. However, there is something else approaching, and you need to understand it, because it changes the meaning of everything being built right now. This Venus-Mars sextile is not existing in isolation. Only 7 days later, on May 26th, Mars in Taurus forms an exact square to Pluto in Aquarius. And astrologically, Mars square Pluto is one of the most intense and confrontational aspects possible. It represents power struggles, control dynamics, emotional pressure, and situations where unresolved issues can no longer remain hidden. It is force meeting resistance, ego confronting transformation, emotional manipulation being exposed under unbearable pressure. But do not misunderstand the purpose of this warning. This is not here to create fear. It is here to reveal truth. Because the relationships, attractions, and emotional bonds forming under the Venus-Mars sextile are about to face a test. And that test will expose whether the chemistry being built is genuine or merely temporary emotional fantasy. Connections grounded in emotional maturity, loyalty, honesty, and consistency will survive the pressure and may even grow stronger because of it. But relationships built on illusion, convenience, emotional avoidance, or superficial attraction will begin collapsing under the intensity of the Mars-Pluto square. And although that may feel painful initially, it is ultimately protection. Better to discover what cannot survive now than lose years investing yourself into something incapable of real emotional depth. This is why the energy unfolding today must be approached consciously, not impulsively, not desperately. Build something authentic. Allow connections to develop naturally instead of forcing outcomes prematurely. Mars in Taurus teaches patience. Venus in Cancer teaches emotional sincerity. Together, they ask you to create relationships that feel emotionally nourishing instead of emotionally exhausting. Ground yourself physically. Leave your mind for a while and reconnect with your senses. Walk slowly. Cook something comforting. Spend time in environments that calm your nervous system. If you are already in a relationship, create emotional space for honesty instead of avoidance. Speak about what you have been carrying internally. And if you are single, stop pretending you want casual emotional detachment if your soul is craving genuine intimacy. Especially for Cancer and Taurus, pay attention to people already existing within your daily environment because the chemistry you seek may not arrive through some distant fantasy. It may already be quietly standing near you, waiting to be recognized. Most importantly, stop rushing the process. This is not instant gratification energy. This is gradual emotional construction. The slow build. The kind of chemistry that deepens through presence, consistency, and emotional trust over time. Nothing dramatic needs to happen immediately for this transit to become life-changing. The energy will continue unfolding over days and weeks. And because this sextile perfects at 0 degrees, it carries one final message you cannot ignore. The past cannot come with you into this new emotional cycle. The wounds, disappointments, betrayals, and emotional fears that shaped your old patterns must remain behind if you truly want to experience the healthier connection trying to enter your life now. This moment is asking you to fully arrive in the present instead of endlessly reliving emotional history. Because the chemistry you have been waiting for is not hiding in old pain or future fantasy. It is beginning right here, inside the choices you make now, if you are finally willing to let yourself receive it.